Hello, and welcome to the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews, brought to you by the Sci-Fi-Christian.com. I'm Ben DiBono. This is kind of a new feature that Matt and I have decided to start here on the YouTube channel. Since we started the Sci-Fi Christian over 2 years ago, I think we've both felt like one of the major areas of things we would cover that we've often overlooked is books. We just haven't always done a great job of including book reviews or book talk, and part of that's just because, we like to do things together, and it's one thing to gather everybody together to go watch a movie and then do a review after that, or do, a TV show like Game of Thrones, but it's a little bit harder to get everyone on the same page for books, which is why, for the most part, I'm going to be here flying solo, but we're going to try and compensate that area of oversight now by doing some book reviews for you here on the YouTube channel. And that also helps to solve a second problem that we've noticed, which is that we want to have a more consistent YouTube presence, especially during the off-season for Game of Thrones. So many of you have been great with subscribing to us because you like the Game of Thrones reviews, and we appreciate that. But as you've probably noticed over the last couple of years since we started doing those, that we've had a fairly spotty YouTube presence during the off-season, and Matt and I have both really felt like we need to improve on that. You guys have been kind enough to subscribe, and we want to make sure we're putting out good content for you, whether or not you enjoy books yourself or you enjoy, these reviews or whatever. I'm sure you'll find something that you'll like. So, now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be on these for the most part flying solo, but both Matt and I are big readers. I'm going to put links to our Goodreads accounts in the description below, so you can find links to both my account and Matt's account there. Those will be in every video, and we'd encourage you to go check out what we're reading there. You can friend us. We love the discussion on Goodreads. I think it's one of my favorite, probably my absolute favorite social network site, being a big book reader. So you can check that out, and hopefully we'll be able to have some good book discussion with some of you there as well. I'm going to be reviewing mostly sci-fi books with this. There might be a few others that I'll throw in. If you look at my Goodreads profile, I have a lot of different categories, but we're going to stick mainly to sci-fi stuff. If there's something I think that would be of interest to the Sci-Fi Christian audience that doesn't necessarily fit into genre fiction, I'll probably throw that in as well. But for the most part, we'll stick to sci-fi, fantasy, horror, that type of thing. So, without further ado, let's get to this first book review that I'm doing, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. Now, as those of you who have been paying attention to our channel know, Matt and I recently did a live blog of 2001 the movie, both of us watching it for the first time, and we did a review afterwards, and you can find those in one of our previous videos. But I decided I wanted to read the books, because I've read a few Arthur C. Clarke novels. I've really enjoyed them. I think he's a fantastic writer. I love the movie, as you know if you watch the review or listen to the podcast. And I was curious to see how does the book stack up, because as we learned as we were doing that live blog, were actually simultaneous projects. Clarke was writing at the same time that Kubrick was making the movie. In fact, in the foreword to 2010, the sequel to 2001, which I just started reading, Clarke is mentioning that he's talking about that process a little bit, and he talks about how he would actually rewrite some of the sequences in the book after seeing how Kubrick had filmed some of the similar sequences for the movie. So a very unique sort of project. And I think that leads to this being a really unique case of a book and movie relationship, because so many times, the old cliche that's almost always true is that the book is better, right? And there's a handful of cases where it's the opposite, where you have a book that's not so great, but it's adapted into something really, really good. I think one of the ones that stands out for me with that is the novel L.A. Confidential. I just didn't care for James Ellroy's writing style that much when I read it, but I think it's a great movie, and I think the movie actually surpasses the book in that case. In other cases, you can have, two that are independently great, where you might have a book and movie that are different, but they're both good, they're both solid despite some of those changes. You can have something like Lord of the Rings, where the movies are good, but the book is still better, and then of course the myriad of terrible adaptations that we've gotten, where the movie just doesn't line up to the book. But this is the kind of a unique case where the two really, really complement each other. They're similar in a lot of ways. The structure is identical. Many of the scenes are identical. Many of the plot elements, the dialogue are, exactly the same. But the way that they're shot or written, depending on if we're talking about the book or the movie, are very different, and they really complement each other. A perfect example is the beginning and the end of the story, which in the movie feels very cryptic, and it feels very much like you're kind of wondering, in the first case, why are there monkeys running around? What's going on with this? And now here's the obelisk or the monolith or whatever we call it, and they're looking up at that, and then we cut to the future, and what's that all about? And then at the end we have David Bowman's transformation into the Star Child, and he's in this weird hotel place, and what's going on there in the movie, and it's all very cryptic, and I think intentionally so, and I don't see that as a bad thing. Okay, I want to make that clear, because I think that some people watching our 2001 movie review misunderstood what we were talking about there, or at least from my part, when I was saying, this is confusing and whatever. I don't think that's a bad thing. I like it being open to interpretation. I like the kind of lyrical, poetic nature that Stanley Kubrick uses for those sequences. I think it's very effective in the movie. By contrast, though, Arthur C. Clarke gets far more descriptive in his novel as far as what's going on. And it's probably seen most at the beginning with the monkeys, or the man-apes, I should probably call them to be more accurate. But I like referring to them as the monkeys, so I think we'll stick with that. And he gets kind of into the character of, I think it's Moonwatcher or something like that, who's the lead monkey that we're following as he's running around. And you really get a sense of what's going on, and you get a sense of why the monolith is there and what it actually affects, and how that changes them, and how it really guides the evolutionary process. So you get some things like that explained in the book a bit more. And in my opinion, this doesn't take away from the lyrical, open-ended way that Stanley Kubrick shoots the movie. It's simply a different take on the same sort of material. And I really liked it. I liked having one interpretation of this that's so open-ended, and that you can take a lot of different ways. And I liked having another interpretation that's a bit more concrete, and I don't feel like those two felt in conflict at all. For me, I felt like they really complemented each other and gave two ways that made where the book makes you see the movie differently and the movie makes you see the book differently. And to me, that was just wonderful. As always, Arthur C. Clarke is just a great writer. I think that part of what I really love about him is the way he makes this sci-fi stuff feel possible, right? He's talking about things that are in the future, futuristic technology, but he makes it feel like it's in reach. And I was thinking of this even in terms of the novel's title a little bit, 2001, where, right, it's 2013, it's easy to look at the title 2001 and kind of mock it a little bit. You guys were so wrong. We don't have any of this stuff, really, that he describes in the novel. We don't have a moon base. We're not having manned flights to Jupiter or Saturn or anything. We don't have artificial intelligence. But I don't think that Clarke and Kubrick were necessarily saying that's where we'll be in 2001. I think that what they were trying to say back in the 60s is that's where we could be in 2001, 40 years out. And to me, that's brilliant as a writer. It didn't feel like they're making a bunch of way off, far-fetched predictions. I think they were making predictions that they knew probably weren't going to come true, but that could come true if humanity really headed in that direction in a very intentional way. And that, to me, is part of the genius of Arthur C. Clarke, is that he casts this vision that's in the future. He sets your imagination absolutely on fire, and then he makes you feel like it's possible, out of reach, but possible. And that's what I love about his books, and that absolutely comes through in 2001. Now, I have to say that of the Arthur C. Clarke books I've read, this isn't quite at the top. To me, I think maybe the crossover with the movie, it does feel a little bit foreign in terms of some of the material. It doesn't quite feel the same tone as something like Childhood's End or The Fountains of Paradise, which are the other ones I've read. I can't really put my finger on what, it just tonally felt a little bit different to me. And maybe because of that, I like the movie just a little bit more. It's kind of interesting because where the movie gets flack, rightly or wrongly, for being slow and difficult to watch, the book's actually a pretty fast read. But I think I like that slower pace better, actually, for the story. So I would, where I gave the movie 5 stars, I would give the book 4.5 stars out of 5. Still an excellent read, still highly recommended, should be read in concert with the movie, but maybe just a tiny bit below, just because I like the movie a little bit better in this case, but certainly wouldn't fault anyone who would have the opposite opinion or rate this 5 stars or anything like that. I think they're both excellent works. Now, there's one final area that I want to address here at the end of this review, and that's a comment that somebody put on our Facebook page after we did the live blog. And I had made a comment on the Facebook page about how, I love the sense of wonder that the movie gave. I love the questions that it asked about the universe and the way that it drew you into contemplations about the meaning of humanity and existence in the world around us. And somebody put up a comment, and I don't remember it word for word, but it was something to the effect of, okay, it asks all these great questions, but as a Christian, shouldn't you be bothered by the fact that it gets the answers wrong? And I didn't give a response to that on Facebook, but I've kind of thought about it since then, and I wanted to offer a response here. First, I'm not convinced that the worldview that this work puts out is in conflict with Christianity, at least in terms of the scientific stuff anyway. I mean, I think that what this person was probably getting at, or at least I assume, maybe I'm wrong here, but some of the evolutionary elements, well, I don't disagree with evolution. I'm a Catholic, and the Catholic Church has embraced evolution as a viable scientific model for how we can understand the origins of humanity, not as a rejection of us being made in God's image, but as an understanding that, look, Genesis 1 isn't a scientific textbook. It's describing humanity's purpose. It's describing our function or the origin of our relationship with God, but it's not describing how humans got there. So somebody who rejects kind of the young earth creationism stuff, absolutely, I don't see the conflict on that end. And if you want more on my view and Matt's view on that, we did a recent episode, I think it was episode 129 on the podcast, somewhere around there, on Genesis, and where we kind of present this argument in more detail. So if we're talking evolution, I don't see a conflict there. If we're talking more metaphysically in terms of what the purpose of humanity is, well, certainly Arthur C. Clarke is an atheist, so there's a differing worldview, but I don't think that means that we should reject what he's saying out of hand. I think that, especially in this case, I don't see him arguing against the divine in this novel. He does that in some places in his novels, but even there he makes interesting arguments. And I don't think that you should have to agree with every last thing an author says to benefit from the book. To me, a book like this makes you think. It makes you contemplate the universe, even if you don't get to the same conclusions as Clarke, even if you are a young earth creationist. The book's going to make you think, and that's a good thing. I don't think we should be afraid of entering into that ideological debate. I'm certainly not. I love reading authors like Clarke. I don't feel like even when he disagrees with Christianity or religion or even theism more broadly in his books, I don't feel like he's being hostile. I think he's presenting his worldview in an intellectually honest way that makes you consider some things as a reader, regardless of the position that you're coming from. And I see that as a good thing. I really do. I see that as an opportunity for me as a Catholic, as a Christian, to think about his arguments, to think about my own arguments, to wrestle with some of those ideas in a new way. And for me, that only helps my faith, and it only helps my worldview, because a faith that isn't tested isn't a faith that's really worth living out, in my opinion. So that would be kind of my answer there. At first, I don't see a conflict, but in whatever areas there might be a conflict, I would see that as a positive, not a negative, and I don't think that's something we should run from. So, wrapping up here, 4.5 stars for 2001 by Arthur C. Clarke. What's on deck for future reviews? Well, I got a couple of things. First, as I already mentioned, I just started reading 2010, the sequel, so it's a fairly short book. I should be done with that shortly. I am in the process of rereading the Iliad right now, so I'll do a review on that. Probably still another month, because I read a lot of books at once, and so something like that I read fairly slowly. So it'll be a while before I get to that one. I'm rereading A Game of Thrones, the first novel in Song of Ice and Fire, so I'll probably do a review on that one when I get there. And then with my daughter, I'm just finishing up Chronicles of Narnia. So she's only 4, but we'll see if she wants to come on and do a book review with me of her experience reading Narnia. And then finally, I've got Neil Gaiman's book coming out in next week, I think, The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I can't wait for that, so I'm going to drop everything else I'm reading as soon as that comes out and really dive into that. I can't wait to read that, so you can look for a review on that, hopefully within a day or two of it coming out. But for now, that's all for now. I'm Ben DiBono, and this is the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews. Goodbye.